wait to hear your story. Let's welcome Constance Collins Margulies.
Thank you, Michelle. You've already told us everything. Now what do we do? I'm really honored, and all of us in our lives, we meet a lot of people, and sometimes you meet somebody who just really, you walk away from them and you can't stop thinking about them. And that was my reaction the first time I came to Lotus House to meet you, but I met her before that, and I wanted to share this with you because I met her when she was developing Miracle Mile, and they said she was an attorney. She was an attorney with one of the largest law firms in Washington. And then when she came to Miami, she developed this huge property on Miracle Mile, and I remember she had a braid down to her tush. And she was this powerful presence. And then the next time I saw you was at Lotus House. And I guess what I want to know, and what we all want to know, is what made you give all of that up to do this?
Okay, well, I guess the first thing I would say is I don't feel like I gave anything up. Instead, I received. And I consider myself very blessed to do the work that I do each day. To have a path with heart at this point in my life. All of you in the room, like me, I think have had struggles, triumphs in business, in building homes, and seeing children off to school, and at some point in mine, I realized I had enough. I simply had enough. And I didn't want to get to the end of my life and just have built buildings. I can remember the first homeless woman I ever saw. I was 13 years old. She was on the streets of New York City in the freezing cold, bundled in layer upon layer and digging through the garbage. And everyone was walking by. And I remember at that age just being completely stopped in my tracks, just watching her, wondering how anyone could be happy as long as one of us lives like this. I could do nothing, I think, at age 13 that would realize the vision that has unfolded in front of me today. But when that time came in my life where I had enough, I realized this was it. This was something I needed to do something about. And I would like to tell you there was some grand vision, but there really wasn't. Okay. Fortunately, my path had been buying and redeveloping urban infill real estate. So I wasn't afraid of looking at an old building and seeing its potential and realizing it could be something completely different. We called it adaptive reuse in the industry, so to speak. And so with my enough, I began to look for properties in the only area where I thought it was affordable, and in the area where, coincidentally, there were many homeless women living on the streets, and that was in Overtown. We were fortunate to find a small enclave of buildings that had a lot of potential. And many of us came together to purchase it, renovate it, outfit it with everything from beds to computers, linens and silverware, and to open it. And I can tell you, in the early days of opening it, we didn't know what we were doing. Absolutely knew nothing about it. But we were responding day by day to the needs of the women who were coming through the door. I want to say with just common sense. Okay, none of us had a degree in anything in the beginning. Of course, today it's very different. Today we have almost 20 employees at the shelter, 4 counselors, job trainers, a full complement of health and wellness programming in our health clinic run by Ray Johnson, who's in the audience with us today. She's our health director. And it has been a journey, a winding path. And whenever I'm asked this question, the answer is always winding, because it was just one day at a time, one step at a time, one person coming forward from the community and saying, hey, I heard about what you're doing, and, you know, do you need bathrooms? Do you need toys for children? Whatever it might be. So, in a sense, it has really grown organically through people coming together who cared to make a difference.
Okay, I'm kind of curious as to how you initially got the word out, that you were available to help people. How did people know you were there? Was it that they just kind of wandered in, or did you have some kind of ambassadors go out to let people know about the services you had?
Well, in the very beginning, as we took over the buildings and helped transition people who were living there into new apartments, by the way, we didn't evict anyone. Instead, we gave them money so that they could pay the first month's rent and the last month's deposit and the utility deposits and have a little bit extra left over to make the move. Forgive me for the attorneys in the room, but we really didn't want to spend money on attorneys' fees. We wanted to spend money helping people get situated and not start a homeless project by making people homeless. So in the very beginning, the neighborhood had never actually experienced that before. And word spread like wildfire. I mean, really everyone heard, okay, they're doing a women's shelter there. And people began to come to the door well before we were open, just listening to the talk on the street. We also went to the local homeless shelters and explained that we were going to be opening, and I'm sure they thought we were crazy, frankly, but there are always people in the temporary shelters who've run out of time. So it was easy for them to make referrals, and I don't think there's been a day since the day we opened the doors that we haven't been full. And in fact, many times we were over full. I mean, we used to have 5, 6 rollaway beds in the shelter because the person in charge of intake is not good at turning people away. And then we just, this past September, were blessed to get a 3rd, 4th building, really, and opened that, and with a good deal of resolve, stealing herself, we now reached our capacity at about 110 women and children on a daily basis. That's about 75 women, and between 25 and 35 children, depending on who's pregnant and who had twins and things like that in the shelter. Getting the word out was easy. Filling the demand is the hard part. And we could fill another 100 beds in 30 days if we had it. You know, in some days I have to console myself that we're doing what we can, but in my heart, I believe there's so much more that can be done, and I hope we don't stop with what we've done.
Well, now that we know that Mother Teresa has met her match. Look, we've all had, I think as businesswomen, as mothers, with all that we take on, we've all had that day where we've just said, you know what, I'm giving it all up and joining the Peace Corps. Or that's it, I'm going to join the Red Cross, I'm just packing it in. We've all had those days. You had that day, but you really, truly lived your passion, and you're living your passion. And I can tell you that after visiting last week, I took a visit to the Lotus House, and upon walking in, felt the energy, felt just what you've created there, which is this safe haven enclave in the middle of Overtown, where you actually feel, I felt safe. I never for a moment doubted that I wasn't safe, and I felt how the women were sitting around and they felt safe. But then beyond that, when you gave me the tour, you're not just providing a roof over their head. There is a blackboard the size of this Miami Beach Chamber of Commerce filled with activities every day. I'd like you to kind of take us through the year, because they spend, I believe, a year. Take us through the journey of somebody upon check-in, let's say, throughout the year.
Okay, yeah, we do have a lot of activities, but the sense of quiet and safety is really critical to everything that we do. Each person has up to a year. Not everyone is with us a year. The average stay is probably around 6 to 7 months. Those people who have a high level of mental health or medical issues can be with us longer than a year. It's very individual. And so is their experience in some ways, and it's very community-oriented in others. Everyone in the house has a chore. Everyone pitches in. So, you know, it's a challenge to keep a facility of that size clean, but you have 75 women contributing to the process, plus our resident alumni who are managers of the facility. Each day, you have an opportunity to participate in sort of a range of activities. It might be that you're in a parenting class, you might be in a counseling session, individual or in group therapy. You might be in a recovery support meeting. You could be in computer classes. You could be studying for your GED, so we have tutors that help with that. If you're on the work path, you could be working one-on-one with our employment director or her assistant, rebuilding your resume. You might take a food prep job training course that we offer at the shelter and become a state certified food handler. You could take the retail job training course that our thrift store operates. It's a hands-on course because we really want to help you build skills, help you learn something new, and give you an environment where you feel safe enough to actually face whatever happened that led you to us. I will tell you that around 90% of the women who are in the shelter have experienced very severe trauma. Most in childhood, molestation, abuse, neglect. And that has very often led to a life of a whole range of further traumas. Either violence on the street, domestic violence, sometimes mental health issues that are quite severe, and substance abuse issues in some instances. So the daily program, the monthly program, the yearly program is about creating an experience for you to safely heal, first and foremost. And I often say when someone comes in the door, don't tell me that you've got a job the next week, okay? Because you can get a job and then you lose it if you haven't healed inside. The pressures, the trauma, the stress make it impossible to sort of navigate on a daily basis all the many things that life presents. So I like to say for the first 30 days, I want you to just breathe. I want you to go to medical appointments, mental health assessment, counseling groups. Begin the process of seeing who you are when you're not in crisis. And then from that place, you can make clear decisions. You can make life-affirming decisions instead of decisions that are about survival and running and escaping. And I will tell you that it's a courageous path for each one. Because when you actually begin to face the traumas that you experience, that maybe you thought you could bury deep down inside. I once had a young woman, she had been sold by her mother at the age of 13, regularly. And she described that experience as something that she holds right down here in a dark place that she doesn't have to face. And as we sat and we talked about it, I said to her, you know, as long as it's here, it's still with you. If you bring this out into the light, if you share and you talk about it, and you've learned that hurt people hurt others, you can begin to forgive and let go and move forward and actually build your own life that takes whatever difficulties happen and turns them into strengths, where you discover that no matter what, you can build a new life. And if there's one thing I have learned, and I have been so amazed by and so blessed and humbled to see, it's the resilience of the human spirit. It's what people can come through. Women who, from the age of 2, remember being molested. I had a woman who I was interviewing to come in to the shelter. I want to tell you a little bit about her experience. When I sat through looking at the application, where we have a lot of information and statistics, I saw that she had a substance abuse history. I saw she had a mental health history. When she came to us, she told me she had been living in the laundromat for 3 weeks. I saw a whole range of things that suggested to me someone who had been severely traumatized. But when I looked at the question, were you abused or neglected as a child, it was marked no, check. And so I sort of went sideways and just in the course of the conversation asked, tell me what it was like for you as a kid. And then she said to me, not good. And I said, well, what does not good mean for you? And she said, well, I had my first baby at the age of 10. And she had never been removed to foster care. I get a lot of women who have been traumatized and go into foster care and then come to us. And that has presented its own challenges. But I realized that this young woman, who then, of course, I looked at the age of the children that were reported and realized she was a child herself when she had a child. Today she has her own apartment. She beams when she comes through the door. She actually has a relationship now with her children. She felt she was never a good mother. No surprise. How could she have been? She told me when she held that baby in her hand, she began to cry because it looked like a doll baby, and she didn't know how to take care of her. You know, it's so easy sometimes to have judgments about the people who live on the street. To assume, well, gee, why can't they hold down a job? You know, what's wrong with them? Sometimes I think we have to ask, how can we be better at supporting everyone in our community to make sure everyone has a life? Well, this house is not about a second chance. As far as I'm concerned, it's about a first chance. A first chance to heal, to have the counseling that we need, to have job training, to feel proud. When you come to our food prep graduations, the tears in that yard as everyone applauds, you get a certificate, you get a bouquet of flowers, and you know that you accomplished something, and maybe you graduated for the first time ever in your life. And it's a moment of incredible triumph. So that's, I think, what the experience is about. The day they get the keys, you're going to think, oh, we're always crying at Lowe's house. There's a lot of tears. Yeah, sometimes, but a lot of times the tears are of joy, not just sadness. It's sadness on the way in. It's sadness in some of those very intensive counseling sessions where you relive what happened in your life that caused you to join us. But there's also this enormous bond and sense of community and family, real family based on love that is nurturing and supportive that comes out of being in Lotus House. And so I think what you see very often is our women proudly wear these shirts because they have been a part of something very powerful. And it's not about a shelter. It's not about a meal and a shower and a bed. It's about life. So I think that's what the experience is like on a daily basis. Learning to live, learning to love yourself.
Is there a dry eye? I mean, I'm sitting watching these two are sipping. We're going to ask you maybe one more question, and then we'll ask your mentor to come up. But I wanted to. We have these impressions of things that I remember. I remember walking into the room where the babies were and the mothers, and thinking, you know, this wasn't a dormitory. It wasn't a dormitory. It was a home. I mean, I remember distinctly feeling like it was a home where they had their children. And I wanted to know two things. Number one, what is it like when you bring in a woman who has her baby and doesn't know what to do? And the other thing is, and this is going to seem mundane after this high, but feeding all these people. You have all these people to feed every day. How does that happen?
Okay. Our maternity program. You know, when we first started, we just served women without children. We began with one building that had 34 beds in it. One of the women that came in was a woman who had lost her baby. DCF had taken her child. She had been homeless. The baby was maybe 2-3 weeks old. She didn't have money for food, formula. So she had gone to the grocery store and she asked the security guard outside the grocery store, "Can you help me, please? I need formula for my baby. I don't need food for myself, I need formula for my baby." And they called the police, and DCF came in and they took the baby away from her. And she was so traumatized and mentally so distraught that she wandered on the streets for quite some months before she ended up in our shelter. And I listened to her story, and honestly, I couldn't sleep for a week. And it was at that moment that I realized we had to have a maternity building because we needed to provide a safe haven for these very fragile families to help them get off on the right foot. And so we were so fortunate that someone donated the money for us to buy another building. And we opened it within a year after the original opening. We opened it in March of 2007. And we wanted to be sure that we created a home-like environment. It's always two mothers, at least, who share an apartment. They actually become like buddies to each other. So if one has to take a shower, the other could watch her baby. And, you know, I mean, they have the same issues together that any two adults have from time to time, but at the end of the day, they really care for each other, and they care for each other's children in many respects, and frankly, the whole house cares for the children. We had a mother move out recently, and I said, "How does it feel to live in your own apartment?" And she said, "Well, frankly, it feels a little lonely. You know, at Lotus House, you know, my baby and I were just surrounded by women, and everyone helped the baby all the time, and everyone loved him, and now we're on our own, and, you know, it feels spacious." I'm not quite sure what to do, so she's been visiting us for almost every day with the baby. It's a transition. But once we took in mothers, or mothers-to-be, it was important that we, you know, have diapers and formula and baby bottles and cribs and bottle warmers, and I think the list is endless. And because it's not just about your experience there, but about building the home when you leave us. So through our thrift store, we make sure that as you leave, you get beds and dishes and linens and cribs and strollers and all the kind of things you need as you go. But while you're with us as a mother, you're in parenting classes. Sometimes to different programs with U of M or with FIU, where people come in, the Healthy Start program comes into the shelter. We make sure that every woman and child has basic medical care, that our mothers get prenatal care, and that their mental health needs are very closely monitored while they're with us, so that they have access to everything that they need. I can't tell you how many diapers we go through, but I can tell you we have a lot of people in the community doing just diaper drives, because it's so incredibly important. And drives for all sorts of other things that we need. We're constantly posting on Facebook, hey, we need this, we need that. Our thrift store is very active out in the community, pulling in the things we need. Because, again, it is not just about shelter. And yes, the meals are, a critical part of our basic services. I think we do something close to 60,000 meals a year at this point. And, you have to be very centered to go to sleep at night when you know that you have to find a way to pay for 60,000 meals a year. But you get up every day and you find ways to do it. We have an art fair. If you didn't go last year, we called it the Wynwood Art Fair. This year we're calling it Art Live. And we bring together the community and artists to really uplift, to explore art. The shelter participates very actively. It's an amazing, wonderful, joyful experience, very thought-provoking. We have lots of children who come to the fair. And of course, our shelter comes to the fair. So that's how we put meals on the table. And what we put on the table is very health food oriented, low fat, low salt. Sometimes there's some grumbling about that. Occasionally, baked fried chicken. But mostly we focus on health and wellness because, they say what you are, what you eat. We want to be sure that every woman and child has a healthful path. So it's not just about the food, of course, it's about exercise. It's like dance programs we have and walking clubs. And
When I was there, we walked into a class, there was a diabetes class going on for diabetics, educating them.
Exactly, education. We have things like yoga 3 times a week, and massage therapy and acupuncture. It's about body, mind, and soul. Bringing all these things in connection to one another within the person and within the community.
I just want to mention one thing. We have a number of people in our Women's Business Council that participate. Is Sabrina still here? Yeah, Shape a Dough is one of the companies that work with you in the community. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how important it is for the community to get involved in what you're doing and how we can participate, no matter if we own a salon, if we are an artist, we can contribute in a very important way. And I know Sabrina's Shape a Dough salon does quite a bit with you in hair and makeup and helping the women to have a sense of dignity and beauty. And I wonder if you could touch on that a little bit.
Okay, yeah. In fact, I would mention to you that a lot of the programming at the shelter on a daily basis, our yoga teachers, acupuncture, the dance teachers, the woman who comes in and does storytelling on Sundays for the children, these are all volunteers. Our health clinic is entirely volunteer staffed. U of M teachers, teaching doctors, and the medical students work with Ray to run the clinic. We would not exist without volunteers. I'm a volunteer. Every day, volunteers make a difference at the shelter. And then the resources that we access in the community in so many ways are based on the contributions of businesses and other organizations that make sure that we have support services that are needed. So it almost doesn't matter what you do. If you tell us what you do, We'll find a way to work with it. You know, we had 250 back robes delivered from a country club in the area at Christmas time. You know, LaGorce took ornaments off a tree and bought our children toys. You know, there are so many things that sometimes we take for granted that we shouldn't, that can make a difference in someone's life. And I can tell you, if you've lived on the street or you've been in the shelter system for a while and you're going to go out on a job interview, if you don't have your hair done, guess what? You're not going to get hired, okay? Because you look like you live on the street. And sadly, no one wants to really hire someone who looks like they live on the street because they look unstable, okay? What we try to do is make sure that you have things like daycare assistants and transportation assistants, that you look beautiful, just as you are, that you have the clothing that you need to go on the interview, the work uniform for the first day at a job that requires that, the special shoes if you need that. It's like multifaceted in what we all use and need every day, and that's what happens at the shelter. And I would suggest to you that the shelter is part of the community. We are the community, all of us. We are connected. We can never forget this, because there isn't a business out there that isn't affected by the fact that there are people in our community who are suffering on the streets. So we have a chance to make a difference. And if you're like me, it changes your life. Okay, you can't give to others and not feel better, not feel good, because you are connected. So I'm not doing anything other than isn't in all of our best interest, and you wouldn't be either if you're doing it. It's just an enormous sense of blessing that you have the opportunity to give, and then gratitude that you have given, and it's received with gratitude.
I think we'd like to bring up Ray, who you brought with you. If you could give us a little introduction on Ray.
Come on up, Ray. Okay, so while Ray is coming up, Ray is an alumni of Lotus House. She is an integral part of its daily operation. She runs all of its health and wellness programming, a mentor to countless women, a mother to many more children, and I honestly don't know how the shelter would run without her. So I think we're soul sisters.
We're going to hear a little bit about your story. Will you share with us what brought you to Lotus House and kind of a transition period and where you are now?
Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be here with Constance, to meet all of you. And the reason why really is because so you can just look at me and know that I am the face of a formerly homeless person. And I lived at Lotus House in apartment 12. And I can honestly say that Lotus House saved my life. And when I look at all the other ladies that come in, I'm seeing myself over and over again. Their face is my face. So we talk about how do people find out about Lotus House? Well, on that very cold morning in 2007, I was homeless. And a lady from my church saw the story about the Lotus House in the newspaper, and she said, Ray, I'm going to take you